Reincarnated with the strongest system. Chapter 521, A Sense of Euphoria. And that's what happened. William narrated everything that happened before his two lovers arrived inside his dormitory room. The two girls listened with serious expressions at first, but this expression then turned into pity after finding out Chiffon's current circumstances. "Will, you picked up a troublesome person," Princess Sidonie said after hearing William's story. She then glanced at Chiffon with a complicated expression before shifting her attention back to William. "I'm sure you have no idea on what kind of person she is," Princess Sidonie stated. "I know," William replied. "She is just like you, Sidonie." Princess Sidonie's body stiffened because of William's answer. She didn't expect that William would use the term "she is just like you," and it made her wonder how he knew about Chiffon's special characteristic. After becoming his lover, the princess shared her secret with William about her being one of the 7 deadly sins. At first, Princess Sidonie thought that William would treat her differently after finding out about her secret. However, the half-elf only smiled and even teased her that she had to wait for a few more years before she could have his babies. "How did you know?" Princess Sidonie asked. She was very curious on how William found out that Chiffon also carried one of the deadly sins of the world. "Half-elf's intuition," William replied. "As if." Princess Sidonie wrinkled her nose. It was quite obvious that William had no intention of sharing this information, so she decided not to pry. Ian, who was seated on William's right side, frowned. She didn't understand what the two were talking about. "Is she also a princess?" Ian inquired. This was the only connection she could think of when William said that Chiffon was just like Princess Sidonie. William and Princess Sidonie exchanged a glance and grinned. Although they felt a bit guilty about not telling the other girls about Sidonie's and Morgana's secret, both believed that this was for the best. If possible, Princess Sidonie didn't want anyone else to know, aside from William, that she was the embodiment of lust. This way, she could protect herself from those who would try to use her powers to do something nefarious. "No," William replied. "I'm saying that she's just as adorable as Sidonie." "Hey!" Ian glanced at Princess Sidonie, then at Chiffon, then back again to the princess. "I don't understand." "It's fine, it's not important." William smirked. "Just think of her as a mini version of Mr. Jekyll." "Ah! Is she also a dowdy?" Ian looked at Chiffon with wonder. "You mean she could swallow a lot of things at once?" "Something like that," Princess Sidonie replied in William's place because she was afraid that the half-elf would make things more complicated. "She is someone that can eat a lot." The princess poked the sleeping girl's cheeks. She had a complicated feeling upon meeting one of the people that also bore a sin that was as strong as hers. When she remembered William's story about Chiffon's attempt to eat a banana peel in the garbage dump, her feeling of wanting to take care of the little glutton budded inside her heart. Ian nodded in understanding. She had seen how domineering Jekyll was during the war. Right now, she had labeled Chiffon as a young dowdy that still couldn't control her powers. "Ah, I almost forgot." Princess Sidonie stopped poking the sleeping girl before staring at William with a serious expression. "How is your bloodthirst coming along these days? I think you should take a drink now, while you're still feeling better." "I'll look after Chiffon for the time being, Ash. I'll leave him in your care." "Understood." Ash then held William's hand. "Let's go. It's no good if you try to wait until you reach your limit before taking action. Do you still remember what happened last time?" "Okay," William replied and held Ian's hand firmly. A few seconds later, both people disappeared from the room, leaving only Princess Sidonie and the sleeping Chiffon behind. Ash's body shuddered when she felt the familiar prickling pain, followed by a sense of euphoria. William drank slowly. He didn't want to waste a drop of Ash's blood because for him, his lover's blood was precious. The mermaid wrapped her arms around William's neck as she enjoyed the pleasurable sensation that was washing over her body. Ash wouldn't admit it, but she was somewhat addicted to the sublime ecstasy that was sending shivers down her spine. After having his fill, William kissed the place where he drew blood from Ash, and used his life magic to heal her wound. The beautiful mermaid had lost all of her strength, so she allowed William to dress her up once again. "Next time, I'll drink Charmaine's blood," William lovingly whispered in her ears. "I've been drinking a lot of your blood as of late. I don't want you to become anemic." Ash sighed before reluctantly nodding her head. "I understand." Charmaine was one of the elves that had surrendered to William after the war in the city of Gladiolus. She was also the officer of the platoon that had captured Arslan when the freedom fighters were having a meeting, near the border of the Zealand dynasty. When William went to the Undying Lands, Malachy told him that the only one that could use his scepter was an undead. This was how the first king of the Hellan kingdom transformed into an arcane spectral lich. Anyone who touched Malachy's scepter would be transformed into a high-level undead and become Malachy's servant. Naturally, William didn't plan on dying, but he also needed the power to command the undead army to help them in the war. With the help of the system, they fought against the corruption of the scepter. However, it also came with a price. The power of the scepter was insane. It was a mythical artifact, which forced William to pay 200 years of his life, and permanently turn his left hand, all the way up to his arm, into that of a vampire's. Vampires were also undead creatures, and held incredible strength and powers. Upon touching Malachy's scepter, William gained the prestige job class, Vampiric Necromancer. This was why William's left hand, and arm, had a different skin tone compared to the other parts of his body. Fortunately, if William drank some blood, the paleness of his hand and arm disappeared, making it look completely normal. Even Malachy was surprised that William was able to resist his scepter's corruption, and didn't turn into one of his subordinates. Out of admiration, Malachy decided to cease all hostilities with William, with a condition. The half-elf would cease to rob Avalon of its treasures and artifacts, that had survived the era of the gods. Also, Malachy allowed William to command his undead legion once. Out of curiosity, William asked if Malachy would give William the permission to summon his undead army from time to time. The Dracolich surprisingly agreed to his request, but there was another condition attached to using the undead legion. "You can only command my army if you are planning to conduct a massacre." This was the answer that the Dracolich had given him. A massacre that would number in the tens of thousands. Malachy even joked that a massacre of millions was more suited to his taste. When William made a proposal of purifying the souls of the undead warriors that had been stationed in Avalon for thousands of years, Malachy didn't reject it right away. Instead, he said that Avalon must always have an army within. Of course, the Dracolich hinted that the new undead army didn't need to be humans. This was why William conducted a massacre and sent the newly born undead elves to Avalon in order to take the place of the warriors that he was about to send back to the cycle of reincarnation. True to his word, William spared the elven women, as well as the elves that he had captured when he faced off with Elador at the Gate of Beginnings. These young elves cursed William's names to the high heavens, and Charmaine was the most vocal of them all. The arcane spectral lich knew of William's need for blood, so he made his move and used his arcane powers to wipe all of Charmaine's memories. It was not only her, the lich had wiped the memories of 12 teenage elves, and made them William's personal blood banks. These elven ladies now stayed inside William's thousand-beast domain, and treated William as their master. In return, the half-elf treated them courteously, and they became the caretakers of the villa inside the thousand-beast domain. Although their memories were lost, they were still excellent warriors and magicians. They often accompanied William's herd and legion in clearing out the Atlantis dungeon when they finished their chores in the villa. The moment that William had attained the Vampiric Necromancer job class, the passive skill Bloodthirst had been permanently added to his status page. You would regularly crave for the blood of others. If the craving for blood passes a certain limit, there is a high possibility of going into a berserk state until you have sated your thirst for blood. Drinking the blood of others will give you plus 20 to all stats for 1 hour. Will, after a few years, set them free, Ash said as she held William's hand. Don't worry, I'm sure that Wendy, Sydney, and I will be more than enough for you to drink to your fill. William squeezed Ash's hand gently as he nodded. If that is your wish, then so be it. I will set them free when I go to the Silver Moon continent. No need to thank me. I also think that this is a good idea. Currently, William needed to drink blood at least twice a week. The longest he could last without drinking blood was 8 days, but if he went past that limit, he would lose himself to his bloodthirst and go on a rampage. Wiping the elves' memories was the Lich's way of thanking William for saving the kingdom that he had founded. Although it might seem like a horrific way of thanking someone, the Lich didn't think much about it. After all, those who dared to attack his kingdom had only themselves to blame for the consequences of their actions. Chapter 522, I will never do anything shameless. You're a girl, so you should take better care of yourself, Princess Sydney said as she scrubbed Chiffon's body with her soapy hand. They were currently inside the princess' own dormitory room, and were taking a bath together. After hearing William's explanation, Ian and Princess Sydney felt pity for Chiffon and decided to look after her for the time being. They had just finished their dinner, and the princess took Chiffon to her room because the little girl couldn't possibly spend the night inside William's room. Chiffon allowed herself to be cleaned thoroughly like an obedient child. It had been a long time since she had taken a proper bath. Usually, she just swam in the river near the academy to clean her body. Half an hour later, the two girls left the bath wearing bath towels. Princess Sydney helped Chiffon dry her hair, after drying hers. The princess had also given Chiffon a change of clothes, while her maidservants negotiated with the academy for new and clean academy uniforms that Chiffon would wear the next day. After the little girl had donned her nightdress, she looked at Princess Sydney with a curious expression. What is your relationship with Big Brother? Chiffon asked. Even though she had only met Princess Sydney for the first time today, Chiffon had already sensed the divinity inside the princess body that represented the sin of lust. I am Will's fiancée, Princess Sydney replied with a smile. That means that he will be my husband in the future. Princess Sydney wanted to make it clear that William and her were lovers. This was her way of telling Chiffon that she shouldn't have any ideas about approaching her lover. Does he know? Chiffon inquired. Have you told him about your sin? Princess Sydney nodded. Yes. The princess hesitated whether she should tell Chiffon that William also knew the sin that the little girl carried. However, after careful consideration, she decided to hold back this information as she first assessed Chiffon's character. It is better to be safe than sorry. Darling is weak against children. Morgana commented from inside their shared mindscape. Yes, this is also the thing that worries me, Princess Sydney replied. I just hope that she won't take advantage of Will's kindness. HMP. Let's see her try. I'll spank her bum to oblivion. Princess Sydney covered her lips and giggled. We'll just observe for now. I don't want you to do anything reckless. Do you understand? Fine. Chiffon observed the beautiful girl in front of her. The little girl's eyes then wandered down on Princess Sydney's chest. After taking a good look at the princess assets, the adorable Loli glanced at her own chest and sighed internally. After a while, Chiffon once again raised her head and asked Princess Sydney a direct question. Did you use your charm on him? Chiffon inquired. Although she could see that Princess Sydney was very beautiful, she still asked just in case the princess had used her charm to make William her fiancé. Chiffon considered William to be her first friend. Because of this, she would do everything in her power to free him if he was under the princess charm. Also, William was able to make those delicious lollipops that were able to keep her hunger at bay. If possible, Chiffon wanted William to give her an unlimited supply of candy every day. I did use my power on him, Princess Sydney answered. However, Will is resistant to my charms. The corner of Chiffon's lips raised by a millimeter after hearing that William wasn't affected by the power of Princess Sydney's charm. This made her impression of the boy, whom she referred to as Big Brother, have a bigger presence inside her mind. Listen, I don't mind if you become his friend, but don't abuse his kindness, Princess Sidonie stated. Don't get any ideas. Do you understand? Chiffon's expression remained calm as she kept her silence. Whatever she was thinking at that moment, the beautiful princess, and her other half, had no idea whatsoever. Where did you come from? Princess Sidonie asked. You're not from the Creator Empire, right? Chiffon shook her head. I was born in the Demon Continent. However, my father cast me aside and asked his subordinate to bring me here. Princess Sidonie frowned. She didn't know that the Emperor of the Creator Empire and the reigning Demon King had a complicated relationship. Maybe I should do a little investigation about this matter, Princess Sidonie thought as she stared at the little girl, who was currently licking one of William's lollipops. She didn't know why, but her intuition was telling her that Chiffon would bring a lot of problems if she were to continue interacting with William. My granddaughter has taken Chiffon to her room. Emperor Leonidas looked at one of his trusted subordinates that was currently serving as Princess Sidonie's maidservant. Her duty was to give regular reports to the Emperor if something unusual happened to, or around, the princess. Yes, Your Majesty, the pretty lady bowed her head. They have just finished taking a bath, and seem to be having a chat with each other. It is quite unfortunate that I can't spy on their conversation because the princess will get mad if she senses my presence. Emperor Leonidas rubbed his chin as he listened to the rest of his subordinates' report. Continue to monitor them, but don't get too close. It doesn't matter if you don't hear their conversation. Yes, Your Majesty. Are you feeling better? Ash asked. Much better, William said as he held her in an embrace. The two had gone to the beach villa on the 10th floor of the Dungeon of Atlantis, right after they finished having dinner with Princess Sidonie and Chiffon. For some reason, William refrained from eating food right after he drank someone's blood. The reason for this was due to the fact that everything he ate tasted like burnt food that resembled charcoal. This abnormality in William's taste would usually fade away a day after he had quenched his bloodthirst. Contrary to what William expected, Chiffon ate with restraint just like a proper noble lady. The sheer contrast between the starved girl, who was about to eat a banana peel in the garbage dump, and the prim and proper lady, who was using a knife and fork to eat her steak, made William breathe a sigh of relief in his heart. That girl, Chiffon, what do you intend to do with her? Ash asked while softly caressing the jewel that was embedded in William's chest. I'll ask Sidonie to take care of her for the time being, William replied. If it's her, I'm sure that everything will be fine. Will it truly be fine? Of course. Sidonie is the Emperor's granddaughter. I doubt that anyone would make trouble for her. Ash closed her eyes as she continued to caress the jewel in William's chest. She had seen the stares of the students when they saw Chiffon walking alongside Princess Sidonie, on their way to the dining hall. Surprise, envy, and disgust painted their faces. Ash was well aware that those three emotions could lead to problems for the princess, who was currently visiting her grandfather's empire. Although there might be no problems in the short term, no one could predict what would happen in the long term. William had been with Ash for a long time, so he could understand her thought process. Understood. William planted a kiss on his lover's forehead. During the day, I'll take care of Chiffon. Since both of us are outcasts, it will be best if the two of us stick together. Keep your ears perked up for any rumors that will spread in regards to Sidonie. I'll handle the rest. By the way, have you heard of any good dungeons nearby? Ash's body stiffened when her lover mentioned the word dungeon. She didn't need to be a genius to understand what the shameless shepherd was thinking right now. Are we going with Plan B? Ash asked as she raised her head to look into William's eyes. William lightly poked her nose as a mischievous smile appeared on his face. What Plan B? Your lover is an upright and outstanding individual. I will never do anything shameless. Ash rolled her eyes because she was very tempted to smack the smug expression on William's face. Aside from the half-elf's grandfather, James, she had not seen anyone more shameless than him. Back in the southern continent, William had stolen resources in the Anisha dynasty, right under the Creator army's nose. She was sure that if William felt like it, he would also do the same thing to the Creator Empire if they made him angry. Chapter 523, I Will Teach You How to Smile. William woke up early because he planned to look for his master to seek his advice. As an alchemist, Albert was capable of creating food pills that allowed people to stave off hunger for 3 days at a time. He was planning to get the pill recipe from the Full Kettle Alchemist and try to use it as an ingredient to strengthen the effects of his chocolate lollipop, which he would give to Chiffon. Although the effects of his lollipop could last for 3 days when consumed, that only worked for normal people. Chiffon was not part of that category, and William wanted to help her. The sight of her picking up trash to eat was something he couldn't erase from his mind. 5 minutes later, William barged inside his fifth master's residence and saw the renowned alchemist snoring on his couch. Clearly, he had once again drunk at the tavern, and probably snagged a beauty while he was at it. William didn't know why his new master was living a playboy lifestyle. However, since this was Albert's private life, he decided to mind his own business. After waking up the disgruntled alchemist, William had gotten the recipe that he needed. Just what are you planning to do with those food pills? Albert yawned. Are you planning to go on a journey? Yes, William replied. I plan to visit the dungeon in Silverwind City tomorrow. Is that so? Well, just make sure you don't accidentally kick the bucket. Don't worry, Master. I'm too young and too handsome to die so early. That's the spirit. Albert patted William's shoulder. My offer still stands. We can celebrate your birthday in the red light district. The tab is on me. Albert laid on the couch and smirked in William's direction. Tell me, are you planning to feed those food pills to Chiffon? William glanced at his no-good master and wondered how the latter knew that he had met with Chiffon. Stupid boy, I have eyes and ears everywhere. Albert raised his head in arrogance. So, am I right, or am I right? Albert rubbed his chin as he eyed William with a smile. One food pill can satisfy her hunger for an hour. As you can see, the prices of the ingredients of the food pill is not cost-effective when it comes to her. If you plan to become her food supplier, you better rob a merchant or a bandit hideout. That is the only way that you can keep that little lass from going to the garbage dump every day. Did you also try to help her, Master? Well, someone asked me for a favor. Unfortunately, I was only able to help her for 3 weeks before I gave up. Albert scratched his head. I'm an alchemist. Making pills without getting any profit is a loss for me. William nodded. Thank you, Master. Do you prefer those types of girls? The cute and adorable ones. William rolled his eyes at the smiling bastard before leaving the room. Knowing Albert's personality, he was sure that his fifth master would tease the hell out of him, so he decided to make a strategic retreat and save himself from embarrassing himself. As William was walking towards his classroom, he saw Chiffon walking in the direction of the boys' dormitories. The red-headed teenager smirked and sneaked up behind the adorable little girl with the plan to surprise her. Unfortunately, when he was only 10 meters away from her, Chiffon turned around and looked at the tree behind her. Big brother? Why are you hiding behind that tree? Chiffon asked. William was surprised because he was sure that he had properly snuck up behind her using the skills that he had honed over the years. Big brother! Chiffon called out once again, forcing William to show himself. A single glance was enough to tell William that Chiffon had just finished taking a bath. Her hair still looked a bit wet, but her current expression was way better compared to the one she had yesterday. William had to admit that Chiffon's cuteness was as destructive as his cousin's, Eve. He also noticed that she was wearing a brand new uniform, which enhanced her appeal. Anyone who saw her would have the urge to spoil her, and put a smile on her face. When this thought came to William's mind, he realized something important. That's right, William thought as he looked at the approaching girl, who was looking at him with a curious gaze. I didn't see her smile yesterday. When the girl was only a meter away from William, Chiffon extended her hand as if she was asking William to give her something. The half-elf stared at the slender and delicate hand for a while, before raising his hand to place it over her palm. Chiffon looked at William in a dumbfounded manner because the latter had misunderstood her extension. "Big brother, I want some lollipops," Chiffon said. "Can you please, give me some?" William scratched his cheek in embarrassment before he summoned a lollipop in his hand. He once again gave Chiffon 10 red, blue, and chocolate-colored lollipops just like he did last time. If Eve were to meet Chiffon, both of them would definitely become good friends. Why? It is because both girls were quite good at extorting people for food. "The next time you ask me for lollipops, you will have to pay me," William said in a teasing voice. Chiffon's expression became serious because she was dirt poor. At most, she only received 100 silver coins as allowance every week. This was nothing compared to the 500 gold coin allowance that the nobles gave to their children who were currently enrolled at Silverwind Academy. "How much will the lollipop cost?" Chiffon asked teary-eyed. William felt conflicted when he saw the sad expression on Chiffon's face. He only said it as a joke, but the little girl had taken it seriously. "A smile," William replied. "You will give me a smile every time I give you a bunch of lollipops. Do we have a deal?" Chiffon hesitated, but she still nodded her head in the end. She carefully stored William's lollipop in her storage ring and placed her 2 fingers at the corner of her lips. She then moved them upwards and showed William the most horrendous smile that he had seen in both of his lifetimes. William flicked Chiffon's head, which made the latter cry out in pain. She then looked at William with a face filled with injustice, as she held her aching forehead. Right now, the little girl was upset because she felt that she had been terribly wronged by the half-elf in front of her. "I said give me a smile, not a grimace," William said. "Are you joking with me?" "No." Chiffon pouted. "I just don't understand." William looked at Chiffon and was itching to flick her forehead again. However, when he saw how serious her expression was, he realized that the little girl wasn't joking. "You mean to tell me that you don't know how to smile?" William asked with a frown. "Have you never smiled?" "Not even once." I don't know," Chiffon shook her head. "Big brother, can you please, teach me, how to smile? That way, I can pay you for the lollipops that you give me." The little girl's pleading eyes were too much for William to bear. In the end, he sighed and patted Chiffon's head. "Okay. I will teach you how to smile," William said softly. "Thank you, big brother." Chiffon lowered her head so that William could pat it more. This was the first time that someone had done this to her, and for some reason, she didn't dislike it. Chapter 524, I will be this girl's caretaker. Ewan Kruger, the homeroom teacher of Class F, looked at the little girl that was seated beside William with great interest. "Ms. Gremory, aren't you supposed to be in Class C?" "Why yes," Chiffon replied as she lowered her head. Ewan adjusted his glasses when he saw the uneasiness of the little girl, who had her head bowed. A smile appeared on his face as he thought of an idea. "Ms. Gremory, would you like to stay in our class for the time being?" Ewan inquired. "I'll talk to your homeroom teacher and ask for a class transfer." Chiffon raised her head in surprise. The professor in Class C was a woman in her early 30s, and she had shown open dislike to Chiffon after being in her class for 3 months. In the end, the professor even hinted to Chiffon that there was no need for her to continue coming to class. She even added that Chiffon should just do self-study in her room because she was dirtying the air in her classroom. After that day, Chiffon stopped coming to classes and just wandered the academy during class hours. Ewan had heard about her circumstance and he pitied the little girl, but he was just a professor in the academy. There were some things that he could, and couldn't do. Now that an opportunity had presented itself, he planned to execute the plan he had thought of long ago, and that was to bring Chiffon to his classroom to study. "See, can I really stay here?" Chiffon asked back. The boys and girls inside the classroom grimaced because they already knew who Chiffon was. She was the girl that had been labeled as the trash eater and, to be perfectly honest, some of them were disgusted with her. Of course you can stay here. Yuan chuckled as he ignored the faces of the students who seemed to have eaten a rotten egg. Clearly, they were not enthusiastic about the idea of having the little girl who eats trash from the garbage dump as their classmate. One of the boys stood up and was about to protest, but Yuan raised his hand to cut him off before he could say anything. Those who don't like the idea of Ms. Gremery staying here can leave the classroom, Yuan declared. I'll be more than happy to write recommendation letters for those who want to transfer to other classes. Of course, whether the homeroom teachers of those classes will accept you will depend on your ability. The boy's words got stuck in his throat. He gave Chiffon a sidelong glance before going back to his seat. They were students of Class F. The rejects of the third years, and no other classes would want to accept them into their ranks. Even if they succeeded, there was a high chance that they would get ganged up on and bullied by their classmates after a day or two of their transfer. They would rather endure Chiffon's presence than suffer humiliation from the noble households of the Creator Empire. William stood up from his seat. He already knew how the students of the academy saw Chiffon, so he had already expected this outcome. The half-elf didn't expect that Professor Yuan would extend the pitiful girl an olive branch and accept her into his class. Since an opportunity had presented itself, William would be foolish if he were to let this go. But for now, he needed to pacify his classmates in order to prevent any problems from happening in the future. I know what all of you are thinking, William said as he scanned the faces of his classmates. This girl beside me is the one that this academy has labeled trash eater. Chiffon's body shuddered because she felt the stares of everyone in the room gathered onto her. I intend to erase this label from her, William declared as he placed his hand over the head of the little girl who was on the verge of crying. From now on, I will be this girl's caretaker. I will give you my word that she will never go to the garbage dump again. I will also ensure that she looks presentable at all times. William paused as he pulled the little girl close to him, to give her some encouragement. I know that it will not be easy for any of you to accept her, because of the things she had done in the past, William said softly. All I ask is that you give her a chance. We are Class F. We are the discarded students of this academy. Right now, Chiffon is one of those discarded students. Having said that, isn't this classroom a place where she should belong? William's words resonated within the hearts of his classmates because what he said was true. However, some of them were still reluctant to accept the little girl into their fold. The half-elf knew that he needed to give them one more push in order to get their consent, and allow Chiffon to study together with them. Every quarter of the year there is a class performance assessment, William stated. How about this? I will make sure that our class will get the highest merit points this month. William smirked. Don't you want to taste that feeling of looking down on those other classes who treat us as trash? Once we become the Academy's top class for the third year, all of them will not be able to say anything. That also goes for Class A. The boy who stood earlier pointed his hand at William and sneered. Huh? Become this month's top ranker? I thought you were going to say something good, but you're just spouting nonsense, the boy said in disdain. If you can really make us the top rankers, then I will call you boss. However, if you fail to keep your words, how about you become my servant for a month? Don't worry, I will treat you fairly. William nodded. Okay. If our class fails to snatch the top spot this month, I'll be your servant for a month. Professor Yuan, and the rest of you will be the witness of this bet. Don't regret your words, Ainsworth. I'm doing this because I don't want to regret anything. Just wait and see. William sat down and held Chiffon's hand under the desk. Don't worry. Leave everything to me. Chiffon looked at the hand holding her own and nodded her head. William's hands were big, encompassing her own. It was also rough due to calluses, but it was warm. The little girl felt that she didn't mind if William were to hold her hand like this more often. In fact, she preferred it if he would always hold her hand. That way, she would feel that she was not alone in the world. Oh my, what a bold declaration! Professor Yuan clapped his hand. Getting the top spot in the quarterly class assessment is no easy feat. I will definitely get a raise if that were to happen. Mr. Ainsworth, please, do your best. My salary increase depends on you. William gave the professor a soldier's salute, and the latter did the same. The girls giggled because the comedic exchange dispersed the tension in the air. The boys also breathed a sigh of relief because the confrontation ended. Chiffon, I already promised everyone that I will be your caretaker, William said. Please, promise everyone that for the duration of this school year, you will no longer go to the garbage dump. Don't worry, I will ensure that you don't go hungry while I am around. Chiffon raised her head to look straight at William's eyes. She was looking for any signs of deceit in William's words, but found none. The little girl nodded her head and stood up from her seat. I, Chiffon Val Gremery, hereby swear that I will no longer go to the garbage dump for the rest of the school year, Chiffon swore in front of everyone in the room. I will do my best, so please, allow me to stay here. Chiffon bowed her head before going back to her seat. The students of Class F exchanged glances before nodding at each other. They had decided to give William and Chiffon a chance. Although they didn't expect their class to hold the top spot for the month, they still wanted to see if the half-elf would be able to keep his promise. The academy had a special test every quarter of the month. The students would get merit points depending on how well they performed during the week the test would be held. They could choose to do a written exam, a commission from the academy, or a quest from the Adventurers Guild. They could even do all three at once. It doesn't matter what they chose, as long as the points they gathered were sufficient. All the points of the class would then be pooled together and the outcome would become the overall class merit points. The highest one within their respective year would be deemed as the classroom of the elites, and would be given special privileges. William had already thought of a way to earn as many merit points as possible during that one-week assessment. Even if his classmates underperformed, he was sure that he would be able to carry their class to the top. Can you really do it, big brother? Chiffon asked. William lightly squeezed the small hand that he was holding as he returned Chiffon's gaze. It's not a matter of whether I can do it or not. It's I will. Chapter 525, The Mirage Caverns. Fall back. Don't let them overrun us. Leader, we are surrounded. Damn it. A group of 6 stood back to back as they faced over 30 toxic frogs that were led by a crowned shadow toad. They didn't expect that they would be facing these many enemies at once, and it made them very anxious. All of them were gold-ranked adventurers, who had come to Silverwind City to challenge the dungeon known as the Mirage Caverns. This was a dungeon which had 50 floors and was considered a Class A dungeon. Because of this dungeon, Emperor Leonidas had decided to build a dungeon city around it. Thus, Silverwind City was born. A few years later, when the city prospered, he decided to build an academy on in the mountain overlooking the city, with the intention of nurturing the elite children of his empire. It was the perfect training ground to train the students of the academy in life and death battles, while they were still young. This was also why most of the children in the empire aspire to enroll inside the prestigious academy, even though the requirements were very high. Naturally, certain restrictions were placed in order to prevent senseless casualties from piling up. No students below the platinum rank were allowed to go past the 30th floor, but there were still idiots that thought that they were strong enough to challenge the dungeon monsters beyond these floors. After breezing through the lower floors, the adventurers thought that they could aim higher, so they decided to go to the 30th floor, which was the dwelling place of frog and toad-type monsters. A/N, I know what you are thinking. Just ask Google Senpai for more details. The toxic frogs were a meter tall, and were classified as Class B monsters. The crowned shadow toad was a Class A monster that specialized in short-range combat using its flexible and powerful tongue. At most, gold-ranked adventurers could only fight against Class C monsters. To give a brief example on how strong Class C monsters were, they were as strong as the Angorian war ibex. As for the crowned shadow toad, it was as strong as Psoglov when William met him for the first time. After meeting 4 toxic frogs, the adventurers immediately engaged them in battle. Although the frogs were stronger than them, the adventurers had an advantage, and that was their teamwork that had been honed over the years. Unfortunately, after killing 2 of their prey, the 2 remaining frogs uttered a loud cry, which was meant to call for reinforcements. The adventurers were not aware of the toxic frog's habits, so they thought that it was just a war cry that would boost its strength. A minute later, several toxic frogs appeared behind them. Seeing that they were at a disadvantage, they decided to retreat. Unfortunately, the escape route they took led to the dwelling of the crowned shadow toad. The Class A monster had a dozen toxic frogs as its underlings, so the group was sandwiched in a pincer attack. "Sorry, I was too greedy," the leader of the group apologized. "I will unleash my strongest attack. Use that opportunity to escape. I will hold them back for as long as I can." "Leader. We won't leave you behind." "He's right. We will get out of this place together." "Don't be so pessimistic, it's just a few frogs and a 2-meter chubby toad. I still haven't gone to the brothels of this city. I can't possibly die without sleeping with their top prostitute. You guys." The leader was touched because his party didn't want to leave him behind. However, he knew that if they stayed, all of them would be buried in this floor, and he would not be able to forgive himself even in the afterlife if that were to happen. The crowned shadow toad extended its venomous tongue to kill the invaders that had dared to enter their domain. Many people had died in this manner because they had underestimated the strength of the monsters inside the Mirage Caverns. "Brace yourselves." The leader of the adventurers raised his sword to parry the toad's tongue that was hard as steel. The toxic frogs took that opportunity to close the gap, and emit a poisonous smog that would paralyze its victims. The adventurers tried to hold their breaths, but it was impossible in the current situation they were in because they were being attacked at all sides. "Gwa!" The leader of the adventurers slammed against the wall after getting lashed by the toad's poisonous tongue. If not for the fact that he was wearing heavy armor, he might have already died due to the toad's merciless attack. Leader. I don't want to die. Brothel. I still haven't gone to the brothel. Someone. Anyone. Please. Save us." The adventurers were now unable to move their bodies due to the paralyzing poison that they had inhaled. The frogs had now surrounded them, and were about to deal the killing blow when a shower of arrows pierced the frogs' bodies. The crowned shadow toad emitted a loud croak, and the remaining frogs sprayed their poisonous smog in the direction where the arrows came from. However, a powerful gust of wind pushed the smog away, clearing it completely. "Will, let me handle this," a voice that seemed to belong to a young man reached the adventurers' ears. "Very well, just make it quick," William replied. Chiffon, where do you think you're going?" "I want to see if those frogs taste good," Chiffon answered as she pointed at the frogs that had died due to William's arrows. "Don't eat them," William said. "Those frogs are poisonous." "But, I am immune to poison. Would you rather eat a frog? Or would you rather eat my lollipop?" "Big brother, I love your lollipop. It's so long, hard, and sweet." The corner of William's lips twitched because Chiffon's words could be easily misunderstood by anyone that heard her. The arrows that had pierced the frogs' bodies flew into the air and returned to the quiver behind William's back, while he was chatting with Chiffon. Ian, on the other hand, summoned her water whip, and activated the power of the Geomancer job class. Right now, she was fighting in swampy terrain. The Geomancer job class allowed her to use spells that were empowered by its current environment. Mud binding. The mud on the swamp surged up to wrap itself on the frogs, trapping them in place. When the crowned shadow toad saw that its underlings were in danger, it unleashed its powerful tongue to slap the annoying newcomer that had gotten in the way of finishing off the adventurers that entered their domain first. Water cannon. Ian unleashed a torrent of water at the tongue that was headed in her direction. The powerful force of the attack repelled the toad's tongue and continued its trajectory until it hit the opened mouth of the crowned shadow toad. A second later, the toad's head exploded, ending its life. Ian watched its 2-meter-tall body crash on the ground before shifting his attention to the toxic frogs that were still struggling with slash against the mud that bound their bodies. Water whip sword mode. The floating whip above Ian's head turned into a razor-sharp, transparent blue sword that glowed in a bluish hue. First form, Blade of Hysteria. Ian charged at the helpless frogs and decapitated them one by one. When the last of the toxic frogs had died, their bodies glowed and transformed into particles of light, leaving several beast cores behind. William waved his hand and the beast cores flew in his direction. He stored them all inside his storage ring before checking the condition of the hunters that had seemed to have lost their consciousness. "They're safe, but the poison in their bodies is a bit troublesome," William said as he changed his job class to Life Wizard. "We can't leave them in this condition." William lined the unconscious adventurers side by side before casting a spell to cure them of their paralysis. Mass Cure. The leader of the adventurers opened his eyes and abruptly sat upright. He grabbed his sword that was lying by his side as he scanned his surroundings. His body felt unusually light, and the injuries that he had received during the battle had been healed. If not for the fact that the damage on his armors were still there, he would have treated everything that happened to them as an illusion. "Wake up," the leader shook his members one by one. "Let's get out of here." Leader. I'm alive. Am I in heaven? Where are the ladies in the brothel?" The leader slapped the last guy on his cheeks to wake him up from his nonsense. He couldn't believe that the bastard was still thinking of brothels right after they survived a near-death encounter. After making sure that his members were really fine, he placed his fist over his chest and shouted, "I don't know who saved us, but know that the Crimson Storm will always be in your debt," the leader yelled. "My name is Sam Brock. Our party is staying at the Dragon Claw Inn. Feel free to find us if you ever need our help. Thank you." The Crimson Storm gathered their belongings and hurried towards the 29th floor. They would never step on the 30th floor again unless they had raised their ranks and regained their confidence. "At least they know how to be grateful," William said softly with a smile on his face. The quarterly assessment test was currently happening in the academy and William only had a week in order to collect as many points as he could before the final day of the exam. When he told Ian his plan, the latter immediately insisted that she go with him to clear the Mirage Caverns. Currently, Ian has been registered as a member of Class A, but due to Princess Sidonie's influence, the homeroom teacher of Class A agreed to temporarily place her in Class F for the duration of the exam. The students of Class A weren't too bothered by this last-minute transfer. They were confident in their skills and they would definitely not need William's retainer to help raise their merits during the exam. "Let's go," William walked forward. "We still have 20 more floors to clear before we get to the final boss room." Ian and Chiffon nodded their heads and followed William's lead. This was the first dungeon that William had explored since he and Ian had arrived at the Creator Empire. He was looking forward to the types of the monsters that were found on the higher floors. Monsters that would soon become part of his strength, once the restriction on his Dungeon Conqueror job class had been lifted. Chapter 526, Farming Merit Points. The Mirage Cavern was the home of amphibian-type monsters. Frogs, toads, salamanders, and Sicilians were the local monsters of this dungeon. The Mirage Cavern had 50 floors with different types of environments. So far, the students of the academy had only managed to reach the 40th floor of this dungeon, but it took them a month to get that far. William only had a week to clear the dungeon, but he was not too worried that he wouldn't make it in time. A/N, 3 days inside the dungeon is equivalent to a day in the outside world. Just like William, some of the students also decided to choose the Mirage Cavern to earn merit points for their test. They planned to go as far as they could within the time limit, but everyone had agreed that they wouldn't go past the 33rd floor where the blaze salamanders were located. These salamanders were very ferocious creatures and their ranks ranged from Class B to Class A. It was almost impossible to find a lone individual, because these salamanders liked to move in groups of 4 to 6. William had only spent 6 days, 2 days in the outside world, to reach the 30th floor of the dungeon. For someone like him that had fought in a war, fighting against Class D and Class B monsters was a walk in the park. Soon, William and the 2 girls arrived at the 31st floor. William had already bought the maps up to the 49th floor and integrated it with the system. Right now, they were doing a speedrun to reach the lower floors as fast as possible. Another day passed and William and his party finally reached the 35th floor. They didn't fight much and avoided battles as much as they could, which greatly sped up their dungeon expedition. The moment William stepped foot on the 35th floor, the system gave him some good news. "Host, I have done a full sweep of this floor and didn't find any humans, or humanoid-type creatures. It is safe to farm points here on this floor." It was then when a devilish smile appeared on William's face. He had been holding back as of late, and this was the perfect time to seriously farm some merit points. "Let's go to the safe zone of this floor first," William said as he led the 2 girls towards the east. "We've been traveling for a while. Let's rest before we go to the next floor." Ian and Chiffon nodded their heads. They were quite relieved that William had decided to rest for the time being. Although their bodies were strong, they still felt exhausted as they rushed towards the lower floors of the dungeon. Half an hour later, the group created a small camp in one of the safe zones on the 35th floor. This was a place where a barrier was erected to prevent monsters from entering. This safe zone was made by the archmages of the Creator Empire. Some of their knights and mages in training would often go to the Mirage Cavern to thin out the number of monsters. They didn't want to suffer from a dungeon outbreak that usually happened when the amount of monsters within the dungeon floors exceeded its capacity. The excess of monsters would overflow on the other floors, creating an imbalance that would lead to a dungeon outbreak. In order to prevent that from happening, the knights and mages of the kingdom would go on a punitive expedition every 4 months to forcefully thin out the monsters on the lower floors of the dungeon. "I'll be back in 3 hours, William said. "Ian, just call for me if something unexpected happens, okay?" "Understood." Ian nodded. William had already told her what he was planning to do. Ian's role would be to look after Chiffon and prevent her from wandering around. This way, William could go all out without worrying about anyone finding out about his secret. After gaining some distance from his companions, William raised his hand and several portals appeared around him. Urchitu, Psaglov, Bastion, Fenrir, Scotteray, and the other local beasts of the Thousand Beast domain flowed endlessly inside the dungeon. "I'll give all of you 3 hours to exterminate all the monsters on this floor. Go and collect as many beast cores and materials as you can," William ordered. "I've already checked and found no humans on this floor. However, in the small chance that you come across someone, knock them unconscious and call for me. I will handle the rest. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes." William nodded. Disperse. William's army, that numbered over 10,000, scattered in different directions. Urchitu had led his fellow Minotaur revenants towards the north. Bastion, who had also been turned as a revenant like Urchitu, led the other Centaur revenants to the west. Psaglov, the troll hounds, and the local beasts of the Thousand Beast domain went to the south. The goblins, led by Xerxes the hobgoblin arcane doctor, and Sharks, the goblin marauder, headed towards the east. William looked at the dungeon map where thousands of green dots encompassed the entire dungeon. The bracelet on William's wrist that automatically counted merit points started to come to life. Merit points gained inside the dungeon were calculated based on the quantity and quality of monsters that the owner of the bracelet had killed. Monsters killed by beast companions also add to the merit points of their masters. Some beast masters could summon several beasts at once. The Creator Empire also had these types of students, so they made sure to modify the bracelets to include the beasts that a beastmaster could summon. Earlier, William had summoned Psoglov to kill a beast in the 32nd floor. The points on his bracelet increased when the demonic dog had killed a Roxy Sicilian that was sneaking up behind them. This was why William was sure that all the members of Herd and Legion were automatically classified as beasts under his command. If the headmaster and the artifact masters of Silverwind Academy, who had created the bracelets, were to know about this loophole, they would probably pull out their hair in frustration. Most beastmasters could summon up to a dozen beasts. However, they had never heard of anyone being able to summon over 10,000 monsters, aside from the dungeon conqueror who had sacrificed himself to become one with the world tree. Although everyone assumed that the dungeon conqueror was dead, they still didn't know if his profession had been passed on to someone else. Naturally, the Creator army, and the elves had their suspicions after William had brought a beast army to fight in the war. However, they still thought that the beasts only participated in the war due to King Minos' influence. It was not impossible to gather thousands of beasts if they had been threatened by someone more powerful than them. This was why, although they were suspicious of the half-elf, they still doubted the possibility that he had inherited his father's profession. 3 hours later, William returned to the safe zone with a smug expression on his face. The merit points on his bracelet had surpassed 100,000. Although the number was high, he knew that this was far from enough to beat the accumulated points from other classes. Even so, William wasn't worried. They were only on the 35th floor. There were still 15 more floors they could farm points on. The half-elf was looking forward to seeing the looks on Professor Ewan's and his classmates' faces, once they saw the amount of merit points he had acquired on his dungeon expedition. Chapter 527, This is what happens when I become serious. There was 1 day left before the assessment test ended, and everyone was scrambling for points. Aside from the class rankings, there were also the individual rankings. Anyone who stood at the top of the rankings would also gain several benefits and even have a chance to get a medal from the Emperor of the Creator Empire. This was something that every student strived for. As long as they were able to get the Emperor's recognition, it was not impossible to acquire a good position in the Empire after they graduated from the Silverwind Academy. Prince Jason, I'm sure that you will once again snatch the top spot for the 5th years, a brown-haired young man said in a flattering voice. That is only natural, another young man commented. After all, Prince Jason is one of the top 3 prodigies of our empire. He already got this in the bag. Prince Jason and his party was currently at the 26th floor of the Mirage Caverns. Among the students of the academy, they were one of the few that had made it this far in a short period of time. It took them 5 days to reach their current floor. However, before they challenged the dungeon, Prince Jason first took the written exams for the different subjects of the academy. This took a day of his time, so he didn't know that William had gone to the dungeon ahead of him. Prince Jason was quite satisfied with his progress, because he believed that no one could explore the dungeon as fast as his team. He had personally handpicked his members and only took the best students in his class based on their individual specialties. 300,558 merit points. That was the amount of accumulated merit points that Prince Jason had collected over the past few days. The record of the Academy for the individual rankings was over 500,000 points. This was the record that the first Prince of the Creator Empire had set when he was still studying in Silverwind Academy. Since then, no one had been able to beat his record. Prince Jason wanted to make a name for himself in history, so he was doing his best to collect as many points as he could before the time limit. If we continue this pace, we will be able to clear the 30th floor by tomorrow, Prince Jason said. After fighting the boss monster, all of us will return to the academy and submit our bracelets. Your Highness, should we also have a victory celebration when we return? It will take the academy 2 days to process the merit points of the entire academy. That sounds like a good idea. Your Highness, I think it is fine if we celebrate, right? Prince Jason nodded his head. Very well. Let's head to the tavern tomorrow and have fun. This is my reward for all of your hard work." The prince's party members cheered as they did their best to flatter Prince Jason. Forming a connection with him was a very rare opportunity, so they were doing their best to leave a good impression. Prince Jason carried himself with grace, while thinking of the half-elf who was nowhere to be seen. He still couldn't accept that the half-elf had managed to make Princess Sidonie his fiancée, by using the slave collar that he always carried around. If not for the fact that he couldn't forcefully take it off his cousin's neck, the prince would have already done so back in the southern continent. "Just you wait, I'll show you what I can do when I'm serious," Prince Jason thought as he set his sights on the entrance of the 27th floor. "Ha ha ha! This is what happens when I become serious." William laughed internally as he looked at the bracelet on his wrist. The bracelet showed that his merit points had exceeded 4 million points. They had arrived at the 49th floor some time ago and were merely taking a short rest before going to the 50th floor to challenge the final boss of the dungeon. Chiffon looked at William's bracelet with a dumbfounded expression. She couldn't believe that William had accumulated so many points in a short period of time. Every time they reached a different floor, William would take them to the safe zone before leaving for a few hours. At first, Chiffon didn't mind because they were making good progress. However, whenever they began to move to head to the entrance that led to the next floor, the passages would be free from monsters. Once was luck, the second was coincidence, and the third time was a pattern. Yes, it was a pattern. They would go to the next floor, then they would immediately head to the safe zone, while killing the monsters along their way. Chiffon had somehow fallen into this pattern, and thought that it was a normal thing when conquering dungeons. However, when he saw the merit points on William's bracelet, that was when she started to get suspicious. "Did you tinker with the bracelet?" Chiffon asked. "Big brother, this is not good. If the Academy finds out that you are cheating, you will be severely punished." "Don't worry your pretty little head over this," William patted Chiffon's head. "I'm not breaking any rules. This bracelet is working fine." But, how?" Chiffon inquired. "How have you done it?" "Chiffon, remember this," William replied with a serious expression. "Your big brother is an awesome individual. As long as you stick to me, all you need to do is smile and wave." Smile and wave. Yes. Smile and wave. I forgot that your smile is horrendous. Okay, forget the smiling part. Just wave." Chiffon pouted and turned her head to ignore William. She had tried her best to practice how to smile, while resting in the safe zone, and William saw it by accident. The half-elf chuckled at the little girl's attempt, which earned him a nagging from Ian. William had already told Ian that Chiffon couldn't smile. At first, Ian was skeptical because how could someone not know how to smile? However, the more she interacted with Chiffon, the more she realized that William was telling the truth. This was why she took it upon herself to teach Chiffon how to smile whenever William left them to hunt the monsters on the floor they were on. "Will, stop teasing her." Ian glared at her lover, while patting Chiffon's head. William raised both of his hands in surrender as he checked the time on his status page. There was still a day left, but William wanted to beat the dungeon as soon as possible. "Let's go," William said. "It's time to clear the last floor and meet the boss of this dungeon." Although he still couldn't add the Mirage Cavern into the list of his conquered dungeons, he could leave a waypoint on the dungeon core room. This waypoint would allow William to instantly travel to the dungeon core without challenging the floors of the dungeon a second time. To be perfectly honest, William didn't plan to take the Mirage Cavern as one of his new dungeons. He was in a relationship with Princess Sidonie, so he didn't want to create any disagreements with his future in-laws. However, that didn't mean that William wouldn't create a backup plan, just in case the other party suddenly turned hostile. In short, William was planning to take the dungeon cores located in important dungeon cities as hostages. This would give him ample bargaining chips to use to force the Creator royal family to compromise with him. This was the advice that James had given him before he left for the central continent. William understood what his grandfather was trying to tell him. His father, Maxwell, had saved the elves from the demonic invasion. But, instead of repaying this kindness, the elves decided to launch an invasion on the southern continent. William realized that the only way he could protect the peace in his life was to ensure that he had the power to threaten the peace of others. This was quite similar to owning a nuclear weapon. If the enemy knew that their opponent had the power to erase them from the face of the earth, they would think thrice before provoking them. "I'm sure that Sidney would approve of this method," William thought as the image of the beautiful princess appeared in his mind. "I hope that the treasure chest in the boss room is good. If it is, I will give it as a gift to Sidney and Morgana on their birthday." William chuckled internally because Morgana had taken the liberty to remind him that they were expecting a gift from him. The naughty girl also added that if William wanted to make her happy, he would allow her to tie him to the bed. Honestly, William was also helping Princess Sidney control the power of lust that was slowly awakening in her body. The two would often spend some time together inside William's thousand-beast domain in order to curb her cravings. That was the only way to keep the power of lust at bay. He was afraid that if he allowed its power to grow unimpeded, a disaster would befall upon the land due to the beautiful princess craving for his love. Chapter 528, A Thorny Path Called Life. Last floor. Boss room. As expected, the last stage isn't going to be easy, William said as he stared at the boss monster and its subordinates in front of him. He had already expected that the last floor of the dungeon wouldn't be easy to beat, because if it was, the students of the academy might have already cleared it. However, no student in the academy had been able to do that. The farthest they had come was the 40th floor, and they had suffered several casualties along the way. Because of this, all the students had been warned not to go past the 35th floor of the Mirage Cavern if they valued their life. Any student that decided to challenge the dungeon had to sign a death waiver that stated that the academy would not be blamed if they were to lose their lives inside the dungeon. This was to prevent the noble houses from finding fault with the academy, due to the reckless actions of the students who wanted to have a high score on the quarterly assessment tests. Crowned Purple Behemoth. Boss Monster. Toxic Toad Behemoth. Threat Level, SS, High. Millennial Beast. Cannot be added to the herd. Berserked Lava Toad. Last Floor Guardian. Threat Level, S, High. Centennial Beast. Cannot be added to the herd. Fiery Lava Toad. Last Floor Guardian. Threat Level, S, High. Centennial Beast. Cannot be added to the herd. Wave Rider Toad. Last Floor Guardian. Threat Level, S, High. Centennial Beast. Cannot be added to the herd. Defiant Tempest Toad. Last Floor Guardian. Threat Level, S, High. Centennial Beast. Cannot be added to the herd. Vicious Stone Toad. Last Floor Guardian. Threat Level, S, High. Centennial Beast. Cannot be added to the herd. A 10-meter-tall purple toad wearing a crown on its head looked down on the three people that dared to enter its domain. It was the last boss of the Mirage Cavern and it was highly toxic. Only those that had a strong resistance to poison would be able to survive its deadly attacks. However, even if one could escape the attacks of the boss monster, they still had to deal with the 4 guardian toads by its side. These guardians were 3 meters tall, and all of them controlled one of the 4 elements. This deadly combination was enough to exterminate anyone below the adamantium rank. Ian gripped her weapon tightly as she prepared herself to fight. She knew that this battle would be difficult, but she was not afraid. Ragnar, let's go. A magic circle appeared in front of her, and Ragnar was summoned inside the boss room. Ian had made a pact with Ragnar long ago. That was why she was able to summon him just like how William summoned his herd and legion. Rough. Ragnar stood in front of Ian and looked at his enemies with arrogance. Ian waved her hand as she activated the special ability that allowed Ragnar to take on a stronger form. Kinship Evolution. Ragnar's body grew and transformed into a 5-meter-tall Grand Cerberus. Ian jumped on her partner's back because they were already used to fighting together. Wow, Chiffon looked at the towering 3-headed dog in front of her with sparkling eyes. So cool. This was the first that she had seen Ragnar, and it reminded her of the powerful beasts in the demon continent. However, her admiration didn't last long because she knew that now was not the time for it. Chiffon took a fighting pose and her hands were covered by a black, spiked gauntlet, which served as her main weapon. Surprisingly, the little girl was a close combat fighter, and she was quite proficient in it. However, William wasn't sure if he should allow Chiffon to fight against monsters that were stronger than her. Chiffon, stay at the back, William ordered. There's no need for you to participate in this battle. Big brother, don't worry, Chiffon replied as she gathered magic power to strengthen her body. I'm confident that I can handle that stone toad over there. Are you sure? Yes. Please, trust me. William nodded his head, but he wouldn't take Chiffon's words at face value. He had already decided to call for reinforcements to help him deal with the final obstacle that blocked his way. Urchitu, Psoglov, Kasaganaga, Fenrir, B1 and B2, come forth. William shouted. The giant revenant ox stepped out of the portal and focused its attention on the crowned purple behemoth. Since it was already a revenant, it was not affected by any type of poison. Psoglov and Kasaganaga faced the fiery lava toad, while Ian and Ragnar faced the wave rider toad. William was going to face the defiant tempest toad that held the power to control the wind element. However, he called out Fenrir, B1 and B2, to serve as Chiffon's reinforcements. Chiffon, allow me to introduce you to Fenrir, William said as he patted the troll hound's head. As for these two dumb birds, the red one is B1, and the blue one is B2. They will help you deal with that centennial toad. Chiffon nodded her head in understanding. Although she wanted to ask William some questions, she decided to ask them after the battle was over. Let's go. William took a step forward and charged at the defiant tempest toad. That was how the final battle in the 50th floor of the Mirage Cavern started. Meanwhile, back at Silverwind Academy. William still hasn't returned. Stanley, the boy that had made a bet with William, crossed his arms over his chest. Did he perhaps chickened out of our bet? Who knows, a boy named Scott, who was Stanley's good friend, replied. He doesn't strike me as someone that will declare something and run away from it. Stefan, who was also Stanley's and Scott's friend, nodded his head in agreement. He was a man with few words, and only talked when it was necessary. Due to the fact that these three boys' names started with S, they were given the nickname the Triple S. Stanley rubbed his chin in contemplation. Well, I don't really mind if he doesn't manage to bring our class to the top spot. Back then, I was just carried away by my emotions. So, you mean that you're fine with having a trash eater as our classmate? Scott asked. He was about to say more when he felt a hand hold onto his shoulder. We should stop calling her that, Stanley replied. I feel bad when someone in our class calls her that nickname. Yes, sorry, Scott apologized. It's just a habit. I will do my best not to call her that nickname again. Besides, William said that he would prevent her from going to the garbage dump again. As long as he does that, there will be no reason to continue calling her trash eater. Am I right, Stanley? Stanley nodded his head. We should stop calling her by that nickname. Their classmates that were listening to their conversation also nodded their heads in agreement. All of them were students of Class F. Although everyone looked down upon them, that didn't mean that they had to vent their frustrations on Chiffon and make her feel bad. Professor Yuan walked inside the classroom to check if all the students in his class had finished with their respective tests. After doing a head count, he found out that William, Chiffon, and Ian still hadn't returned. The assessment test would end at 3 in the afternoon the next day, and, if they were still not back by then, they would be punished for not returning their test bracelets that recorded the points that they had gathered during the duration of the 1-week assessment test. I hope that the 3 of them are fine, Professor Yuan thought as he adjusted the glasses on his face. He had already been teaching in the academy for 7 years, and had been the homeroom professor of Class F from the beginning. The professor had seen how his students had struggled in their grade, and some of them had lost motivation to climb up the social ladder. However, he still didn't give up and continued to teach the worst class, every school year. The reason? It was because of a belief. He believed that anyone had the potential to succeed in life. It didn't matter how low their status was, or how lacking they were compared to geniuses in the empire. What Professor Yuan wanted to instill in them was a belief. A belief that no matter how high the hurdle that they must face in the future, they should find the courage to face it head-on. That way, they would regain the confidence that they had lost, and a world of infinite possibilities would once again open its doors to each and every one of them. William, I'm counting on you, Professor Yuan prayed inside his heart. Make it so that the students of Class F can once again raise their heads with pride, and walk the thorny path that is called life. Chapter 529, Is Your Academy Teaching Weaklings? Part 1. The last day of the assessment test. Princess Sidonie had just finished lunch, and was about to return to her room when she heard a commotion in the dining hall. A crowd gathered around Prince Jason, and those who had gathered were constantly praising him for his triumphant return at the academy after challenging the Mirage Cavern. That's amazing, Your Highness, one of Prince Jason's classmates exclaimed. You actually beat the record that was set by the first prince. Your name will definitely go down in the academy's history. Incredible. I am blessed to witness the birth of a legend in my generation. Thank you, Your Highness, for giving me this opportunity to witness your greatness. Long live Prince Jason! Long live! Prince Jason acted as if what he did wasn't a big deal. When his gaze landed in Princess Sidonie's direction, he gave her a brief smile before nodding his head in greeting. Princess Sidonie returned his greeting with a nod of her own before turning away to return to her room. The prince's eyes followed the beautiful princess until her back disappeared from view. Everyone noticed his behavior and exchanged glances with each other. All of them were well aware of the custom of the Creator royal family. Cousins marrying each other was a very common thing, and one look was enough to tell them that the prince was planning to do just that. However, there was one problem. The princess was wearing a collar on her neck, and the one that gave it to her was none other than the red-headed boy that hailed from the southern continent. Due to William's declaration of being Princess Sidonie's lover, almost everyone in the academy had come to know his name by now. They also knew that he had been thrown to Class F due to the reaction of the nobles of the kingdom. Simply put, they didn't like William and they wanted Princess Sidonie to take the collar on her neck off, and find someone who was more deserving of her beauty. None of the students surrounding Prince Jason said anything, because they didn't want to be singled out by the prince. Instead, they continued to praise him for his achievement, and ingratiate themselves to him. What a bunch of bootlickers! Morgana snorted from inside their shared mindscape. Well, that's just how the world works, Princess Sidonie replied. Those in power tend to gather people around them. This is a very common thing when you're a member of a powerful faction. HMP. Just because he broke the Academy's record he thinks he's that good? The moment Darling returns, everyone will probably have a stroke due to shock. By the way, where is Darling? He didn't tell you. Princess Sidonie asked back. No. Also, why are you asking me? If I know about it, you will also know, right? The corner of Princess Sidonie's lips curled up into a smirk. Big sister, don't think that I don't know about your night escapades when I am in deep sleep. Every time I wake up in the morning feeling hot and bothered, I know that you've been doing something behind my back. What are you talking about? I'm not doing anything wrong. You're stuttering, big sister. Because you are saying weird things. Heh. Princess Sidonie shook her head because she could tell that Morgana had no intention of spilling the beans. Actually, she wasn't too bothered by it. She had already known how naughty her other half could be. Her only concern was that she wasn't there to see whatever she was doing with her beloved. As soon as Princess Sidonie entered her room, a sudden surge of power washed over her body. She almost collapsed from where she stood. Fortunately, she was able to lean on the door before her legs lost their strength. "It's breaking out of control again," Morgana muttered worriedly, as she hugged Princess Sidonie within their shared mindscape. It had been a week since the princess had been with William, and there had been no time for them to spend some quality time with each other. William had been helping her regulate the divinity inside her body, but due to his absence, the power of lust was starting to break free from Princess Sidonie's control. The only saving grace was that whenever these outbreaks occurred, she was alone without anyone around her. She had long stopped using her power to turn people into her loyal subordinates. "Take deep breaths. Follow me, inhale exhale inhale exhale." Morgana guided Sidonie to help her to calm down. 5 minutes later, the beautiful princess had regained control of her body. "Don't worry. Darling will be back soon. Just hang in there, okay?" "Yes." Princess Sidonie walked up to her bed and laid down. She felt so weak after fighting against the divinity that was starting to manifest. Just before she fell into sleep's embrace, the image of her beloved half-elf appeared inside her head. She hoped that by the time she woke up, William would have already returned to the academy. That way, he would be able to help her, dispel the power of lust that she had forcefully held back inside her heart. "Should we wrap things up here?" "I think all of the students had already submitted their bracelets," one of the professors that was managing the collection of the bracelets proposed. A few of the professors nodded their heads, however the headmaster of the academy, Gilbert, remained seated. "It's only half an hour before the promised time. Let's just wait and see it through till the end," Gilbert said. His voice was firm, which meant that he was not going to take no for an answer. A year ago, there was an incident when a dozen students had been unable to pass their bracelets in time because the professors managing the collection had left earlier than the promised time. Many nobles had complained to the headmaster, so he decided to personally participate on the last day of the assessment test to ensure that all the professors would do their duty properly. The professors glanced at each other before sighing inside their hearts. Since their employer told them to wait for half an hour, they would wait for half an hour. While everyone was waiting for the clock to strike 3 in the afternoon, 3 students entered the room. All of them looked disheveled, and it was clear that they rushed to the academy's staff room in order to submit their bracelets in time. The headmaster immediately recognized 2 of the latecomers. One was a half-elf who was being monitored by the special agents of the Emperor, the other was a troublesome girl that hailed from the demon continent. William also recognized the headmaster of the academy and headed in his direction. He thought that it would be best if he surrendered his bracelet to the man on top, so that no mishaps would happen. "Sorry we are late," William said as he removed the bracelet from his wrist. "Here you go, headmaster." William placed his bracelet on top of Gilbert's desk with a smile. Chiffon and Ian did the same. Gilbert nodded before looking at the clock on the wall. There were still 10 minutes before 3 in the afternoon, so William and his group had arrived in time. "I have received your bracelets," Gilbert replied as he took William's bracelet from his desk to personally see his results. "All 3 of you can return to your rooms and take a bath. Wait. Don't go." The 3 teenagers almost jumped back in fright due to the headmaster's sudden shout. They didn't expect that the man who stood at the top of the academy would look at them with bloodshot eyes, as if they had committed something outrageous. Chapter 530, Is Your Academy Teaching Weaklings? Part 2. This. Gilbert's hands shook while holding William's bracelet. His eyes turned bloodshot as he stared at William's merit points. The professors got curious because their headmaster was acting in a weird manner. They sneaked behind him to check what was wrong with the bracelet. Their eyes widened in shock, as their jaws dropped from the unbelievable sight that they saw. William von Ainsworth, 6913367 merit points. Oh my God! Almost 7 million merit points, the homeroom professor of Class B exclaimed in shock. How is this even possible? Boy, you better explain this. Did you tinker with the bracelet? A professor from the 4th year division asked as he looked suspiciously at the red-headed teenager who had a smile on his face. Do you know that there is a heavy punishment for anyone who dares to cheat in the assessment test? I didn't tinker with it, William replied. Then how? Another professor stepped forward. Do you know that the highest record we currently have was from Prince Jason? His merit points were 621,489. His Highness has set a new record, and yet your points are 10 times higher than him. What? Only 621,489. William replied in a dumbfounded manner. Is your academy teaching weaklings? Why are his points so low? The professors almost spat blood when they heard William's comments. They couldn't believe that someone actually dared to call Prince Jason's accumulated points low. Not to mention, he even added that they were teaching weaklings. The homeroom teacher of Class A in the 5th year division's face became beet red out of anger. He had been feeling smug earlier because not only did the prince set a new record, his class had also gained the highest merit count among the 5th years. Although it was guaranteed that they would be hailed as the best class in the 5th year division, he was unable to accept the fact that someone had easily beaten the new record that a student of his class had made. We need to investigate this. Prince Jason's homeroom teacher stepped forward. How can this be possible? No one has gotten this many merit points since the academy has been founded. William crossed his arms over his chest as a devilish smile appeared on his face. No one managed to do this? Oh, my! I guess I overestimated the elite students of this academy. Something as easy as gaining 6 million points is deemed impossible? If I had taken this assessment test seriously, I could have easily earned 10 million points. However, I wanted to be Loki, so I only settled for nearly 7 million. The half-elf shook his head in disdain. What are you going to say next? Are you going to tell me that no one has beaten the last boss on the 50th floor of the Mirage Cavern? Because I just beat that boss not long ago. The room descended into silence after William had dropped a bomb in their faces. Gilbert almost dropped the bracelet in his hand, because of how much it shook after hearing William's words. Why, you have beaten the boss monster at the 50th floor of the Mirage Caverns. Prince Jason's homeroom teacher pointed a shaky finger in William's face. Yes, William answered. The boss was a 10-meter tall purple frog, and his subordinates were 3-meter tall. Each of them had a different element. Man, those toads were quite springy. They jumped around like their butts were on fire. William took out 5 beast cores inside his storage ring and piled them on top of Gilbert's desk. A purple beast core the size of a basketball, and 4 beast cores the size of bowling balls stood side by side. The professors all stared at the glowing beast cores on top of the desk. Beast cores that were not a day old had a certain lively luster in them that was different from those that had been stored for a long time. All of them had fought in dungeons before, and they were very familiar with the quality of beast cores. With this kind of evidence in front of them, it was hard to refute William's claim. How did you do it? Gilbert had regained his calm and asked this question directly. It's a trade secret, William replied before he took the beast cores and stored it inside his storage ring. I don't intend to share it with anyone. All the professors inside the staff room cursed William in their hearts. What he did was not uncommon. Most adventurers didn't want to share their strategy when dealing with high-level dungeons. It was their way to earn big, so these kinds of things were a well-guarded secret. Gilbert sighed and placed the bracelet down on his desk. The 3 of you may leave now. The final result of the assessment test will be announced in 2 days. William nodded his head and thanked Gilbert. Ian and Chiffon did the same, and the 3 left together in a carefree manner. After the students left, an old man wearing glasses stood up from the corner of the room. He was the Grand Master that had created the bracelets that were used to measure the merit points that the students earned during this time of year. He took William's bracelet from the desk and scrutinized it properly. The headmaster and the other professors didn't say anything and waited for him to announce his verdict. 5 minutes later, the old man placed the bracelet back on the desk. It wasn't tampered with, the old man stated. He then tapped the bracelet thrice and a projection appeared in front of everyone. William von Ainsworth. Merit points, 6,913,367. Merit source, Mirage Cavern. Last entry, Boss Room. Mirage Cavern 50th floor. The professors sucked in deep breaths after they had seen the records inside the bracelet. They knew that once they announced the results of this year's assessment test, the entire Creator Empire would go into an uproar. Gilbert hurriedly stood up from his seat to return to his office. He needed to talk to Emperor Leonidas and tell him what the half-elf had achieved during the week-long test. Gilbert knew that if William's record was announced publicly, it would go down in the annals of their empire's history. William escorted Chiffon to Princess Sidonie's quarters because he was afraid that the little girl would be bullied along the way. The noble ladies looked at the disheveled half-elf in shock as he swaggered inside the girls' dormitory. This was not the first time that William had come here, because Princess Sidonie had often invited him to dine with her. The girls were also used to the dashing half-elf who made their hearts flutter with his smile. However, seeing his current appearance, they couldn't help but be shocked because the latter was currently not very presentable. William noticed their stares, but he didn't mind them one bit. He just walked with confidence as if he owned the place while holding Chiffon's hand. After knocking on Princess Sidonie's room twice, the half-elf thought that the princess was not around. He then opened the door to allow Chiffon to go in when he noticed a peculiar scent in the air. William scanned the room and found that the door that led to the princess' bedroom was left partially open. The half-elf could sense a divine power emitting from within, so he hurriedly walked towards it to see what was happening. Inside, he saw the beautiful princess lying on top of the bed, and panting for breath. The moment her beautiful golden eyes landed on William, a barely audible plea escaped her lips. "Will help me."